Good morning, Bears. It is a Wednesday that acts like a Thursday because it's a Wednesday Thursday epic. Why is that? Because there's no school on Friday. That's right, spring break begins. And today's the last day that you have to do any work. And it's actually manageable to get this work done today. Sometimes I make the Thursday Friday epics pretty big where you kind of need Friday to get it done. You'll have tomorrow to get this work done. But I'd advise get it done today. Then tomorrow we're going to say hi, we're going to play our songs, we're going to say goodbye to each other, we're going to talk about our Easter break, our spring break, and then we'll also watch the last little bit of the Jesus film that we're going to watch some of today, which is a secondary source based on a primary source, the Luke's Gospel in the Bible. So right now we're going to do a quick little overview just about where these stories come from. Are they stories? Are they history? Are they a combination of both? Well, many scholars believe they're a combination of both. And when I say story, that does not mean it's not true. It could be true, but they used in the ancient times, even more than we do now, stories and parables and tales. And there's a purpose to the writing of things, whether it's the Old Testament, the Torah, or as Christians call it the Old Testament, Jewish calls it the Torah, and then the New Testament. Now, the Jesus stories primarily come from the New Testament. Christians do believe that the Old Testament prophesies Jesus because they believe he is the Messiah from the Old Testament. Now, Jewish people who are still practice Judaism and did not convert to Christianity, they don't believe Jesus was the Messiah, so they obviously don't think the Old Testament talked about him. That's a little more in depth than we can go here, but we are going to go with what the Christians now hold. We studied Judaism before. Now you're going to see we're in the Jewish context still. We're in the Roman Empire. Roman controlled Israel. Roman controlled Bethlehem and Jerusalem, where the temple still stands at this point in history, around AD 30. Some people say AD 33. I tend to go with the AD 30 date of Jesus' death, and if you're a Christian, resurrection. Like we talked about, the death, the life, and the death and the burial of Jesus, high percentage of historians believe this is just fact. It's true. He's an historic figure. There's tons of evidence. Tons of evidence that obviously something happened radical, because how do you get a Christian religion that dominates most of the world? Even Islam talks about Christianity. Jews and Jewish people still believe in Jesus as a prophet, but not a God. But how did this come from this small little town and turn into this big religion? Something happened. People agree with that. What becomes supernatural is, did he actually rise from the dead, come back to life? A lot of debate there, and people debate that their whole life. And if you're a Christian, you believe that is part of your doctrine, or at least your parents do. As you get older, you do your own research, you make your own decisions. But as a Christian religion, that's why we celebrate it. That's originally why we have spring break, is because of the Easter holiday, not just about bunnies, and it's the resurrection of Jesus. So where did that historically come from? Well, like we said, it came from the New Testament, which was written anywhere from AD 40 all the way to, some people would say, into the 100s. Even say 50, 60 years after the death of Jesus, people were writing stories. Now, some of the letters were very quickly after, and those are from Paul, and that's how Christianity spread. They'd write letters about the Jesus and the gospel. They'd write it to a church, and then the church would copy it and spread it around. And a lot of the time it was orally, just speaking. So these stories were probably going around very quickly after Jesus' death and resurrection. But then they were written down in the Gospels. Now we're going to focus on a gospel called Luke. He was a doctor. He took time to write this historic story slash tale of Jesus' life. And it doesn't mean it's exact order. For example, Jesus told these parables probably 100 times, maybe more. And so he probably told them in different orders. He probably told them in different places. He might even change the words. Well, Luke takes the research from people that heard these and memorized these stories, and he writes them down, and sometimes just puts them in one spot in his story of Jesus, when maybe he never told them all at the same time like that. We don't know. But bottom line, most historians believe this is an accurate, fairly accurate primary source to learn about this time period of history. Now, talking about ancient findings, and we're jumping around a little because we're covering an overall biblical texts, archaeology, one reason we don't use the textbook that often is because this is not in the textbook. Dead Sea Scrolls discoveries are first ancient Bible text to be found in 60 years. A 6,000-year-old skeleton of a partially mummified child and a 10,500-year-old basket were also discovered. That's amazingly old. I think they're saying it's the oldest existing basket. When was this put out? March 18th, 2021. Remember, we always do our sourcing. Updated March 18th. Came out March 16th, 2021. This is brand new, hot off the press. You're not going to find it in a textbook. And these Dead Sea Scrolls are actually of the Torah, which sets up the New Testament. Because remember, we're still talking about Judaism because this is a Jewish context. So let's just read a little bit. A new set of Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient fragments of biblical text dating back almost 2,000 years and thought to have been hidden during Jewish revolt against Rome, have been found in an Israeli desert. What are we learning here? Israel's a desert. Jewish revolt against Rome. We studied a little bit of that, actually, when we studied the Jewish holidays. Lena remembers Jewish revolt against Rome. The Israel Antiquities Authority announced Tuesday that a 4-year archaeological project uncovered portions of the book of the 12 minor prophets, including the books of Zechariah and Nahum. It was the first such discovery in 60 years. It's amazing. Also uncovered was a 6,000-year-old skeleton of a partially mummified child and a 10,005-year-old basket, which Israeli authorities said could be the oldest in the world. A CT scan revealed the child's age was between 6 and 12, with the skin, tendons, and even hair partially preserved. Amazing. So this is real deal archaeological finds happening right now. This is what we're trying to do in this class, is not just learn facts, but learn how to research, learn how to discover with checking sources and learning things as they happen. So really fun. Among the recovered texts, which are all in Greek, remember, now we're talking about Greek. We studied the Greeks. We talked about how the Septuagint is the Torah written in Greek. Why? Because Greek back then was like English is today. Almost the whole world had to speak it. So they translated the Hebrew text from the Hebrews and the Jewish people into Greek. And it's Nahum 1:5-6, which says, "The mountains quake because of him, and the hills melt. The earth heaves before him, the world and that dwell therein. Who can stand before his wrath? Who can resist his fury? His anger pours out like fire, and rocks are shattered because of him." Now, I think they're saying that's God speaking because it's capital H. We can learn about their religious beliefs from this. So this is a great article. I'm going to include this article in our groups for your own perusal if you so choose. But I just wanted to tie this in. So this is a constantly changing as we find a new text. So now let's go to the New Testament, which this was probably written around 60, 70 AD, could have been 40. Maybe they were telling the stories by 35, but finally written down 50 or 60. There's a debate over when the final book was written. It's called the Gospel of Luke. And we're going to see how this ties into our video. We're almost there now. So this is Jesus' trial before Pilate. Then the entire council took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. Politics. Who controls them? The Romans. They began to state their case. This man has been leading our people astray by telling them not to pay their taxes to the Roman government and by claiming he is the Messiah, a king. Look at what we're learning about. They had taxes. That's economics. They have governors. Roman controls them. Who's this Messiah? So Pilate asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "You have said it." Pilate turned to the leading priest and to the crowd and said, "I find nothing wrong with this man." Then they became insistent, "But he is causing riots by his teaching wherever he goes, all over Judea, from Galilee to Jerusalem." What do we have here? Geography. "Oh, he is a Galilean?" Pilate asked. When they said that he was, Pilate sent him to Herod Antipas, because Galilee was under Herod's jurisdiction, and Herod happened to be in Jerusalem at the time. Interesting. Now we see they have different people control different areas, all from this historic text. Herod was delighted at the opportunity to see Jesus because he had heard about him and had been hoping for a long time to see him perform a miracle. He asked Jesus question after question, but Jesus refused to answer. Meanwhile, the leading priests and the teachers of religious law stood there shouting their accusations. Then Herod and his soldiers began mocking and ridiculing Jesus. Finally, they put a royal robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate, who had been enemies before, became friends that day. That's an interesting subnote. So look at all the history and details we're learning about this time period. Then Pilate called together the leading priests and other religious leaders, along with the people, and he announced his verdict. You brought this man to me, accusing him of leading a revolt. I have examined him thoroughly at this point in your presence and find him innocent. Herod came to the same conclusion and sent him back to us. Nothing this man has done calls for the death penalty, so I'll have him flogged, then I will release him. And flogging is not a good thing. It hurts. And then we're going to scroll down a little bit. You can read this as we go down. And then here we have the crucifixion, which we have talked about. So we're not going to focus on that right now. His death, buried in a tomb. You can go read this on your own by searching up the death and burial of Jesus in any Bible. And then they have the bury. As his body was taken away, the women from Galilee followed and saw the tomb where his body was placed. Then they went home and prepared spices and ointments to anoint his body. But by the time they were finished, the Sabbath had begun, so they rested as required by law. Once again, we learn now about burial ceremonies. We can tie that to what we learned in the Etruscans. They buried in caves. Guess what? Jesus is being buried in a cave, but very early on Sunday morning. So here's what we're focusing on today: Resurrection Sunday, Easter. But very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. They found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. So they went in, but they didn't find the body of the Lord Jesus. As they stood there puzzled, two men suddenly appeared to them, clothed in dazzling robes. The women were terrified and bowed with their faces to the ground. Then the men asked, "Why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? He isn't here. He is risen from the dead. Remember what he told you back in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be betrayed into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and that he would rise again on the third day?" Then they remembered that he had said this. So they rushed back from the tomb to tell his 11 disciples and everyone else what had happened. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and several other women who told the apostles what had happened. But the story sounded like nonsense to the men, so they didn't believe it. Interesting. However, Peter jumped up and ran to the tomb to look. Stopping, he peered in and saw the empty linen wrappings. And then he went home again, wondering what had happened. Notice they did not believe yet. Notice Jesus decided, now we are into the part that is more religious belief. If you're a historian that doesn't believe in miracles, you're obviously not going to believe this part of the story. If you're a Christian and you believe in miracles, then you can believe, no big deal. If you believe in God, he can raise somebody from the dead. If there is no God and we're just physical stuff, probably didn't come back from the dead, something else happened. So this is the debatable part. But if you're a Christian, you definitely believe it. But what's interesting here, historically, the disciples didn't even believe it. The women did because they saw the two angels. So that same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking along, and look what happens here. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing so intently as you walked along?" They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, "You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here the last few days." So listen, if that means all of Jerusalem was in an uproar. That's why people knew about this. And remember, we know a new religion started at this time, so something came along. So anyway, we can read along with this, but we're going to watch a video, and this shows Jesus talking to them, explaining to them, according to this text, that who he was and that he was back from the dead. And here Jesus appears to the disciples and once again says, "Peace with you." And then they become believers and they go on to start spreading Christianity and the good news of the Bible. So there's the fast version. If you're going to churches or listening to it online or in Christian or Catholic, you can go read these things and you'll probably be hearing about it over the next couple of weeks because it's a very important time, probably the most important religious ceremony for Christians. Now, the Ascension is when Jesus says, "And now I will send the Holy Spirit, just as my Father promised, but stay here in the city until the Holy Spirit comes and fills you with power from heaven." You can read about that in Acts. Then Jesus led them to Bethany and lifted his hands to heaven. He blessed them. While he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up to heaven. So they worshiped him and then returned to Jerusalem filled with great joy, and they spent all their time in the temple praising God. And this, my friends, is the beginning of Christianity. All right, now, what's next? Let's go take a look. So next up, we are going to watch Mr. Downs adventuring in Rome. Rome in a day. Why Rome in a day today? Because I think we're going to not come back to Italy and Rome after spring break. I think we have Indus, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, China. We have a lot to get to. So this is going to wrap us up. So this Colosseum that you're going to see here in this video was around at the time of Jesus. And later on, they persecuted and killed Christians by throwing them to the lions. It was an epic deal. If you go and watch my channel on my Europe 2018 playlist, Pompeii in 4 minutes shows a smaller version of a Colosseum from that time period as well. And you can see how this part of Italy also copied Greece and a lot of mummies that could become zombies. Frozen in time, dead statues. Pompeii in 4 minutes. We don't have time to watch that today, so watch that on your own. All right, Rome in a day, and then we're going to dive in to a secondary source and see what we can learn about this time period by this very accurate historic film, the Jesus film. We'll watch as much as we can get through today. Tomorrow, no work. We're just going to finish it. Top slide, all about the resurrection. All right, let's do this. So we finish that up. We'll watch the rest of this tomorrow. You got a little bit of time left. Get working. You already have a resurrection slide. That was one of our concepts. All you need to do is add a CER to that, tie in what you've learned from my little video, from this video, and you are done for spring break. Tomorrow we show up, we watch some more of the Jesus film, we play our song, and we kick off spring break. All right, have a good day, everybody.